Hey, howdy everybody, welcome back to my channel. This is the first in the series of videos where I talk about all my favorite music from 2024. This video specifically is my favorite albums and EPs that came out this year. I'm also going to do a video on the albums and EPs that I heard that were not from this year. So just ones that I heard this year but not from this year. And then I'm also doing a video on singles from this year and singles that I heard this year that are not from this year. So there'll be a whole series of videos coming out. I'm considering doing like my favorite melodies of 2024, favorite riffs of 2024, just like little things like that. If I want to do a video on it and I have enough like things to do a video on it, I will. Anyway, best albums and EPs of 2024. I'm going to start with the EPs because I only heard 5 EPs this year and they were all very good and it's hard to rank them. But because I've only heard 5, I'm just going to talk about those 5 and rank them in order of my least most liked to my most liked, because even the one that is at the bottom is still really good and really worth a listen. But I've only listened to 5 that came out this year, so it's pretty small amount. Number 5 goes to an EP that is actually a one-man project, and the one man who made this project reached out to me and requested it on my Patreon, requested that I listen to one of the songs from this, and I loved it, and I listened to the full EP, and it was incredible, and I just couldn't... I was so surprised at how good it was for a one-man project. And I still, to this day, think it's a really good EP. It just doesn't have as much staying power as some of the other EPs that I've heard this year, and that's why it's at number 5. It is by no means at 5 because it is bad. I just find other EPs a little bit catchier, and I like some other ones a little bit more, so don't think that this is a slight against this one. But please go listen to this EP. It is very underrated. This is Ocean Witherer, Pillars of the Anguish Cycle. Next up is another EP that was requested to me in my Patreon, and I loved this. I loved the few songs that I heard that were requested. I ended up listening to the whole EP and doing a little review of it on my channel just because it's so good. And this is a very small band from Denmark, I believe, and it was just 2 guys, but after this EP came out, they expanded and now they have more people joining them and they are a full band, and I'm very excited to see what music they can make in the coming year and onwards, because they are going to blow up huge if they keep this up. It is a very interesting fusion of black metal and rap, and I think it works incredibly well, and the blend is just so good, and the way that the 2 genres are integrated together works so incredibly well. The songs are very catchy, the melodies are very catchy. It's just altogether just so good. This is Gradient's Iron Sight.
Maybe I'm the reason demons dwell in this abyss. One straw just toss them all out here. Load the rounds to a nearer sound while I'm walking out of nowhere. And neither come leaving them.
The number 3 spot goes to an artist that has a very special place in my heart. She was the winner of my album of the year last year, so if you know that, then you probably already know what I'm going to say. This EP I listened to and I was kind of blown away by. It was just more incredible music from her, and I just love it. There's one flaw that I have with it that I think I mentioned in my Coreycast episode on it, but the one little flaw is that some of the syllabic emphasis of the lyrics is slightly off, and it feels slightly not quite as tight as it could be, but honestly, that doesn't bother me that much. I still love this EP. I still think it's amazing. I would still rank it in masterpiece tier, and this is Madeline May, The Bard.
I'm bored again, guess I'll pretend I'm from some distant magic land. How very hard to be a bard. Slow down, take a nap, I'll catch up to you. Run laps around me, but we'll both burn out soon. Wanna become all of the rays of the sun, shining down on your face on a warm day.
The number 2 spot goes to one of the most interesting groups out there. I think you all probably know what this is, but they do thaw in such a weird way, and it's so beautiful. It is so heavy, it is so crushing, but so majestic all at the same time. It is magical. And even though they kind of, some people I've heard say that they're a little bit gimmicky with their sound, and I would agree that some of the sounds are a little bit samey, but it doesn't bother me. And I think the weird glitchy, like high-pitched sounds that they use, I don't find it gimmicky. I find it super interesting and a really kind of incredible evolution of thaw as a genre. And I think just overall this EP embodies all of that, and it is so good. It is definitely deserving of the number 2 spot on this list. And I was going back and forth between this and my number 1 spot, but I eventually decided on this order. My number 2 spot goes to Mirar Mare. And then you all probably know what the number 1 spot is going to be, but I gotta give it a little bit of an introduction. This is one of the greatest deathcore releases that we have had in a long time. And it is a very small EP. It is kind of sad that it is this short. I want it to be longer. I want there to be more of this. It is a collaboration between 2 bands, and it's probably like the collaboration of the decade. It's incredible. It is flawless. It is perfect. And the only reason that I rank it higher than Mirar is that I think I found it more listenable than Mirar. I find it catchier. I find it more interesting throughout on repeat listens than Mirar. And I find that it hits exactly the same on repeat listens as it did the very first time. It's still amazing and definitely highly deserving of the number 1 best EP of the year. This is Disembodied Tyrant and Synestia collabing on The Poetic Edda. moving on to the album portion of this video, my favorite albums of 2024, there's actually only 15 of them on this list. Anything past this 15 is either just okay, ranking down to like, yikes, this is not good. I'm not going to talk about those albums, but any albums that I think are just okay are on that other side. So if you are expecting an album to be here and it is not, but I have heard it, I would rank it in the just okay. Like, like it's okay, like it's listenable for me, but I'm not going to come back to it a bunch. I don't really like it all that much. Like that's kind of where I'd put those albums. I'm not going to talk about that because I don't want to be super negative in this video. This is just talking about my favorites from this year, so let's get into this. Number 15 is from one of my favorite artists of all time. This is a collaborative effort between this artist and a few other ones. They've worked together before. This is the second volume in, I guess you call it a series, I guess, but it's the second time that they've collaborated on an album. And although I don't think this second collaboration is quite as good as the first album, I think this volume 2 is still very good. It's still a vibe. It's still very, like, it still very much nails the atmosphere that it's going for. And one of the songs on here is just incredible. One of my favorite songs of the year, and I'll talk about that in my song video. But overall, I think it's more so just an album that I'll put on in the background to listen to instead of something that is quite as good as the first album, but I love it still so much. This is Julie Fowlis and Friends and Company, Alt Volume 2. The number 14 spot goes to an artist that is very popular, one of the most popular artists in the world, and his music is all over the place. You hear it everywhere. Everybody knows who he is. He dropped this album this year. It is very solid. I don't think it's quite as good as some of his best works, but I still think it's really, really good. I liked it on first listen, but I think it grew on me a lot as I listened to it even more. And I think it's a great album, and I think it's one of his best, maybe like a top 4 or 5, but I wouldn't place it at number 1 or 2. But it's still very good, and it's still very catchy, and it's got a lot of interesting hooks, and it's got a lot of I hate to say it, but TikTok-worthy moments. This is Kendrick Lamar, GNX.
Life goes on, I need her, my babies. Woke up looking for the broccoli. Hot key, keep a horn on me, that come my seat. Squabble up, squabble up, squabble up, squabble up. They just wanna kumbaya, nah.
This world concrete, flowers grow. Heartache, she only do what she know. If it was up to me, I wouldn't give it nobody's no sympathy.
Turn this TV off, turn this TV off. Turn this TV off, turn this TV off. What they talking about? They ain't talking about nothing. What they talking about? They ain't talking about nothing. What they talking about? They ain't talking about nothing. What they talking about? They talking about nothing. Pickable, I just put them bookers in my chain. Pickable, 80 pointers like a Kobe game. Pickable, 7.62s, I make them playing.
The number 13 spot goes to an album that I recently just put out the video on. I think it is my most recent album video that I have done. Outside of the Home Team, which I just listened to the Home Team actually earlier today, but we're not talking about that because I want to give that enough time to digest, so I'm not that's not in consideration for this. But this album is very vibey. You probably already know what it is if you have seen my upload schedule. Very vibey. The atmosphere is incredible. The instrumental usage is incredible. The mixing is incredible. The melodies are really, really good. A lot of the songs kind of grew on me a lot as I listened to it more and more. And I've listened to it maybe, I don't know, 7, 8, 9, 10, somewhere around there times by now, I would say. And all of the songs are still very catchy and very memorable. And it's just a lot of fun. And I enjoy it quite a lot. This is Sad Night Dynamite, Welcome the Night.
Wake up, pass out. We don't know how to stop the show. We don't know how. Welcome the night. Welcome the night.
Son, what have you done? Put down the gun, don't need more bloodshed. All said and done, I still got love for you, my dear friend. Don't be running when things get rough.
The number 12 spot goes to another very popular artist who I discovered last year, and I love her music now. And this album, I think, while not quite as good as her previous album, I think is still really, really solid. And I listened to it, and I thought it was amazing in my first listen, and it just got better as time went on. There are a few songs on this, though, specifically a collab with another very, very popular artist. I think the most popular artist in the world, who I will not name because I think she's painfully mid, but you all know who she is. And I think like that song is the worst song on the album. And then there's a few other stinkers, but overall, I think this album hits, and the songs that hit way more than the songs that don't. And I think that far outweighs the negatives to this album, in my opinion. And I just love this album a lot for what it is. It's very good. This is Gracie Abrams, The Secret of Us.
Look at me now, said I wouldn't do it, but I hunted you down. Know you were a girl, but it didn't work out. Know you bought a house, but you had to move out. God, I'm actually investing. Haven't even met him. Watch this be the wrong thing. Classic. Tell me, is she prettier than she was on the internet? Are your conversations cool? Like, are you even interested? I know what you are. I knew it. I know you. I called it. You don't know how to step outside yourself. You're an idiot. Now I'm sure. Now I'm positive. Ooh, bet you're thinking she is so cool. Kicking back on your couch, making ice from across the room.
The number 11 spot goes to a duo of musicians from previous bands that you probably know. Mainly Time the Valuator and one other band that I forgot at the moment, but I'm going to look up right now. Alaska. There we go. Okay. So those two guys broke off and formed this duo supergroup and put out a pop rock album. And it's amazing. And it's very, very good. The melodies are super catchy. The hooks are incredible. The overall album is just, it's so happy. And I love happy music. And it nails the happiness aspect of it. It's such a fun listen. It's a great album. You all probably know what it is by now. It is Floya Yoon. The number 10 spot goes to an artist who is a veteran of the metal scene from other bands. I'm not going to spoil it, but you probably know. But he is now doing his own thing, and he's kind of just making his own music, and it is fire. It is so good. It is super catchy. It's super vibey. It's got so much interesting stuff going on. All of the songs, I think, on this album are really good. Now, I have not listened to the extended version of this. There was an extended version, I think, released back in October, and I just found out about it like a month ago, but I haven't listened to the extended version, so this is purely just based off of the normal version without the extra tracks. But those tracks, I think, are very, very good. Like I said in my reaction video to this, I don't think it's his best album, but it's still really solid, and it's still very catchy. This is Bill Murray, American Motorsports.
It's in the past, but I still do. No, I'm not in heaven yet, but it's a better hell than you. We were just a middle-ass sundown cigarette, a hot mess to burn out in the air. Let's keep it 100%, it just ain't the right time. Once we were perfect together, but look how time flies. I should be spinning you around now. Instead I'm not trying to forget about every time I let you down.
The number 9 spot goes to a band that is relatively new, but they've been killing it lately. They're fairly new to the scene. I think they came around, I found them in like 2021 or 2022, somewhere around there. So they're pretty new, but the music that they write is super interesting. It takes aspects of metalcore and it combines them with Thal, and it puts them together in a way that makes it sound much less generic than just generic metalcore. And it's very, very interesting. And a lot of the songs on this album are super, super catchy. There are some that I don't quite like as much as the others, but I wouldn't say any of the songs on this album are bad. I think the album as a whole is still really good, and it's very listenable. I go back and I listen to it quite often. This is Alt from the New World. The number 8 spot goes to a band who I have fallen in love with over the past year or 2 years or so. No, probably like a year and a half, probably. This band is something special. I am a big fan of folk music, and they do folk rock very, very well. This album, I think, isn't quite as good as their previous album, but I still like it. That's kind of a trend with a lot of artists this year. A lot of these albums where it's like, oh, it's not quite as good as their previous album, but it's still really good. And that's kind of what I'm thinking for this as well. It grew on me a lot on subsequent listens. I think the atmosphere in this album is super cool, and it really prioritizes the atmosphere and the feeling over having catchy melodies and stuff like in their previous album. So while it's a very different shift, I think it's done very well, and I really appreciate how it's done, and I really like this album. This is Calandra, A Frame of Mind.
Pain and misery, it all seemed to follow me wherever I go, wherever I go. I speak of a message said thousands of times, yet we smile when it's mentioned and roll our eyes. I feel what are we without each other? We
The number 7 spot goes to one of my favorite bands in all of deathcore, very possibly my number 1 favorite. If not number 1, at least like top 3. But they are very, very solid. This new album, I really loved on a first listen, and then actually I listened to it a few more times, and I was kind of like, you know what, this isn't quite as good. And then I listened to it a few more times, and I was like, you know what, no, this is great. This is very, very good. And even the tracks that I didn't like in the beginning, I grew to really, really love. Even the first track, which I went on record and said in my reaction as being the weakest track, I still think is maybe not the weakest track, but also just really, really solid. So I wouldn't say it's bad. It's just really good. Like, this whole album is still very listenable. Every time I listen to it, it never gets old. I adore it. It's got one of my favorite songs of the entire year on it. It's so good. This is Fit for an Autopsy, The Nothing That Is. Well, if Fit for an Autopsy isn't my number 1 deathcore band, then this group certainly is. This is a duo group between, kind of the same as Floya. Like, they were in 2 other bands, then they come together and they're working together now, and I think they're making the best material that they have ever made, especially with this album. This album blew me away when I first heard it. It's a long album, but it justifies its runtime. Every song is really, really cool. It has a lot of interesting ebb and flow throughout the album as well, where it doesn't ever really get old, because just when you feel like you're being hit too much with some heavy stuff, it kind of dies down and it gets into some quieter, more melodic ballads. And there are several ballad tracks on this album that are very, very well written, and they're super memorable and super well done. And it just makes the whole album a very interesting, very cohesive, really, really good listening experience, even going from beginning to end with a longer album like this. This is Darko Starfire.
But this simply can't be a coincidence. There is simply no way.
Darko.
It's the boy you cry wolf poke. Everything I see, I am a piece of you. But I am fine enough in a world of tragedy.
Alrighty, and we are getting into the top 5. Now, this is interesting because this has been a year of growers. And my top 5, I think with the exception of 2, my top 5 were all albums that I did not call masterpieces on a first listen. But I would, with the exception of this number 5 spot, I would now call all of these top 5 albums masterpieces. They are all very good, except for the top 5 spot has 2 songs that I skip over every time. I hate them, but every other song is so good. This top 5 spot, with the exception of those 2 songs that I always skip because I can't stand them, they annoy me. There's one specific thing, I talked about it in my reaction, there's one specific thing that those songs do, and it really, really annoys me, and I just can't handle it. It's like a musical pet peeve of mine with this band, and I have to skip those songs, but every other song is a masterpiece. There is not a single, like, other than those 2 songs, there is not a single bad song on this album. If I could take those 2 songs out and have just this album without those 2 songs, it may be like a number 2 contender, but as it stands, it's number 5 because of those 2 songs. I really just wish those 2 songs weren't there, but the rest of them are incredible. I would go so far as to say that this is the best album from this band that I've heard. I actually have only heard 3 albums from this band, I think, so I haven't dove into their like back catalog discography of all their older albums that people say are so good. But of the 3 albums that I've heard from this band, this is my favorite. I cannot get enough of it. Every time I listen to it, it just gets better and better. It is a masterful album, except for those 2 songs. And it is Leprous, Melodies of Atonement.
My vision is fading now. I'll have to make peace somehow. I'm afraid my soul alas.
The number 4 spot goes to a band that I am so glad that they've blown up in the way they have, because they deserve all their success, and I just hope they keep getting bigger, because they're going to be massive one day if they keep this up. They're going to be like up there with Sleep Token and Bring Me the Horizon as like one of the best just bands like in this space. And they're not even, well, I'd call them metalcore, but like they do it in such an interesting way, and the lead singer's voice is so beautiful that it stands out so much from all the other music in the metalcore genre. It's a masterpiece. I don't think there is a single bad song on this album. I think it works super, super well. The only reason that it's lower than some of the other albums on this list, than my top 3, is because I really like albums that flow super well as an album, and this one does, but it definitely feels a little bit more single oriented, where the songs are more like individual songy instead of flowing as one, which I know not every album has to be, but I just like that when albums do that. So that's why I'm going to be biased towards albums that do that. But I still think that this is a masterpiece album. I don't think there's a single thing wrong with it. I think all of the songs are amazing, and I think it is a 10 out of 10 masterpiece. This is Relica, Secrets of the Future.
Step into the center of the dying light. Claim it, make it rich, revitalize it till you're purified. And make the rose roll back. Hands up, pray for the wicked, pay the way up. Sending our love all the way to the top of the fuckers. You chew it up and spit it out like it's offensive. Mask off, no pretending. Sympathy's gone, you spent it. Making one's fun, but who ends it? Now watch me. Like the light in a spark.
All right, here we go. Top 3. This was a very difficult choice. I kind of knew how the top 3 was going to go, but I wasn't sure what order to put them in. So I thought really hard about it, and I think I have finally become satisfied with this order for the top 3. Number 3 goes to a band that I discovered recently, and I think this is actually the only album of theirs that this is the only album of theirs that I've heard. It is technically a 2-parter, because they released the first half of the album and then the second half separately, but I'm reviewing it all as one. You probably already know what it is by now if you know how this album came out. But I just think this is one of the best. I'm going to spoil it by saying this, but one of the best albums ever, and definitely the best instrumental album I have ever heard. With the exception of one track, this album is all instrumental, and it somehow does not feel instrumental, if you know, like, if that makes sense. Like most instrumental albums, I feel they have moments where they drag, or they feel like, okay, this is cool atmosphere, but like there's nothing really I can latch onto in the song or whatever. Like sometimes I feel like that's how a lot of instrumental albums are. Not this one. The guitar acts as the vocals. The guitar melody is incredible. Every single song is incredible. From start to finish, this album is a non-stop masterpiece of melody and vibes and atmosphere, and it is just perfect. I can't think of a single flaw with this album, as with all of my top 3, but this one is just, it's amazing. It is my favorite instrumental album of all time, and it goes to Night Verse's Every Sound Has a Color in the Valley of Night. The number 2 spot goes to another album that is very special. This band I discovered this year as well, and they have quickly shot up to be one of my favorite bands of all time. And this album is, sorry to say it for some people, and I'm scared to say this because people will judge me, but this is my favorite album of theirs. I don't know if it's just because of the timing that I found this band, or like the release of the album being like me being there for the release of the album, or what, but like I think this is their best album. And it is my 3rd most played album of all time on Spotify. The first one obviously being Mestaten und Erwarten, and the second one being my number 1 pick for album of the year. But this is a very close contender for album of the year. It's so close. It is so close. I really, really slaved over trying to figure out which one I wanted for number 1. But the number 1 album sneaks ahead just by a little bit. Just by a little bit, and I'll talk about that when I get there in a minute. But this one, I think, is a perfect number 2. It is a flawless album. It has no bad songs. All of the songs are so good. It blew me away on first listen. Even hearing the singles, again, in the context of the album, they hit harder. They are better in the context of the album. And that's how you know an album is good. I think the flow of it overall, even though kind of like Relica, it is more individual song focused, I think the flow of it works really, really well. I think the order of the songs on the album is perfect. I wouldn't change a single thing. It's got such a great ebb and flow throughout the album. The highs and the lows are placed perfectly. The songs are the perfect length. The melodies are so memorable. Everything about this album is amazing. It is incredible. And that is Bola, Friend of a Phantom. I'm wearing the shirt as well. So you had to know it was on this list somewhere if it's up on my wall. That leaves my number 1 album, my album of the year, which I think if you know me, I think you know what it is. It may be obvious, it may not, we'll see, but it is, I think, a perfect album. And I think it is possibly in the running for my top 5 albums of all time. Every time I listen to it, it gets better. And I could say that about all of these top 5s, but this one especially. The first time I listened to it, I think I gave it banger tier because I thought it was good, but I didn't think it had that much staying power. I was wrong. I was so wrong. I could not be more wrong. It is one of my favorite albums of all time now. I listen to it constantly. It is my second most played album of all time, right behind Mustad Nudurvaten. Not even that far behind, only like 1,000 minutes behind, so I could definitely overtake it if I wanted to. But I just have no bad things to say about this album. It is perfect. Perfect. Everything about it is perfect. The best part, I think, is the way that it uses motifs and the way that certain musical passages will come back later in the album in a different context, or the way that, especially the title track is 4 songs long. The way that the title track builds from beginning to end and the musical payoff that you get in that final track is amazing. The way that the last song of the album takes some of the motifs and it turns them into like a sort of melancholy sounding sad finale to the album is amazing. I cannot overstate how perfect this album is. And it goes to Caligula's Horse, Charcoal Grace. Thank you so much for watching this video. Stay tuned for more of my favorite music from 2024, as I'm going to make videos on more of the stuff that I've heard. I'm going to make videos on my favorite songs from 2024, my favorite albums and songs that I heard that are from previous years, but I just heard this year. So stay tuned for those videos. But I wanted to get the EPs and albums video out of the way first, because I figured that's what most people are looking forward to. And sorry, I'm sick, so I'm kind of losing my voice a little bit, but I had to make this before my sickness gets worse, you know. But that is my list of my favorite 15 albums of 2024. Let me know your lists down in the comments below. Let me know what you think of my list. Let me know if you're angry that Boundaries and Knocked Loose weren't on this list. And I will see you all in my next video. Goodbye. Thanks for all your support. See you next time.